All right, everybody. Go time. Thanks everybody for being here. I know there were other events earlier in the day. And before I forget, I see a lot of you have your stickers that you voted. I should mention the polls do close at 8. Some of you who want to still get out there and vote, you can do so. And, we're coming up on our 3rd season of Splice, if you can believe it. In December, after we do that one, we'll march right into the 3rd season. But for today's reading, we're super excited. This is a matchup, honestly. Not matchup, a match. That when we came up with it, we were absolutely just looked at each other and we're like, yes, this one is a true, there's a lot of synergy there. So we're super excited to have Laura and Danny read for us right now. So first off, to kick off, Henry Goldkamp will do the introduction to Danny Unger. So welcome everybody again to the Splice. It's wonderful to see you.
Hello. Hey. Always a pleasure. And it's my pleasure to introduce Danny Unger for Splice. But first, a little about my problems. I've developed the possibly bad habit of associating certain poets' work with the voices of comedian actors, which completely alters the poetry at a near molecular level. About 3 years ago, I started to imbue Frank Bedart's poetry with the intellectual arrogance of a Catherine O'Hara sketch. Richard Brodigan, thanks to a YouTube comment, now sounds exactly like Kermit the Frog. Likewise, Marina Sateva's breakup poems, lush and devastating to be sure, often snap with a voice not unlike Sacha Baron Cohen's Bruno. I am sorry to do this is really lame, but case in point from her poem, An Attempt at Jealousy. How is it living with a postcard? How's your life with a tourist on Earth? Do you love her? Is it to your liking? How's life? Do you cough? How do you live with cheap goods? Is the market rising? How's kissing plaster dust? Are you bored with her new body? How's it going with an earthly woman with no sixth sense? What occurs with this habitual method is a complete reversal of meaning within the poem. These poems, studiously sapped with sadness, suddenly break a smile out instead of a heart. But Danny Unger, in both her newest work and her recent chapbook, Dear Egg, from Tilted House, has already done this work for me. While lines in Dear Egg conjure the work of contemporary comedian Jenny Slate, in my opinion, in their Brechtian estrangement, in personally offensive mundanity, quote from Danny, "So, Egg, what is your favorite type of capitalism?" Unger already paves a two-way street that might be tragedy, might be comedy, kind of like the Jewish female comedians of the modernist era who simultaneously broke into and out of the Jewish tradition of humor. As well as the poet's own works in her own words, which is critiquing the Zionist teachings of my upbringing, and this is a quote from the new work, maybe it should just stay there in the prayer. In a 1987 article, The Unkosher Comedians, its author labels these early Jewish female comedians as brazen offenders of the faith and creatures of unclean lips, names like Sophie Tucker, Belle Barth, and Joan Rivers, quote, all of whom gleefully violated the Torah's conception of feminine modesty. While by no means would I consider Unger a, quote, vulgarian, another new word I learned from this obscure academic article, she does consistently refuse logical transitions line by line, opting instead for the jolting parataxis that thrusts the reader into a new zone of poetic materials, recalling the monostichic mania of Ariana Rines. It's chaotic in its way, but also grounded by Unger's linguistic pratfalls that are so acrobatically landed upon. So, Danny Unger's Dear Egg then addresses the materiality of things in the shape of a long-distance lover on tour, is one of the embodiments, an egg, of our strange, lopsided nature of our lives' potentials, impossibly imbalanced, possibly perfect. Addressing the egg as dear reminds us that we ourselves are both ridiculous and delicate. It's like watching a joke in reverse. Reading Dear Egg for the umpteenth time, I was given the image of a bullet who, as it politely splits the flesh of someone it bumps into, says, "Excuse me, just passing through." But all is overridden by the desire for connection. To quote Danny's poem, "Whether you like it or not, I'd like to transmit the live feed of my brain to you so you can see what kind of space I've made for you there." Spoken like a true poet, I think. Y'all welcome Danny Unger.
Bringing this down. I did do stand-up comedy in college a little bit, so I think that is appropriate. Also, I love Jenny Slate so much and that I will quote from my own tongue-in-cheek tweet about Jenny Slate, where I said, "I think I've made a lot of progress because when I was in my 20s, I wanted to kill myself, but in my 30s, I just want to be Jenny Slate." I first just want to say thank you so much, Splice, for having me. It's such an honor to be here and to be reading with Laura Mullen. And I hope I do the synergistic comparison justice because it's incredibly flattering. So my reading is going to be in two parts. The first part is going to concern many things, among them bodies. So we're going to do some body poems. And then the second part is going to be about places, right? Those two things are not mutually exclusive. Bodies are in places, that's on purpose, but just to kind of give you the lay of the land here. Yeah, I think we'll just get started. So I also wanted to say, most of the work is very new. I'll read some older work at the end. I'll read from my chapbook, which I have some copies of here. But we're going to start with some very, very new poems. These poems have been read by workshops in class, but probably only read out loud 0 to 1 times before. So you're getting a Splice exclusive here. Let's move it down a little more. Make it comfy. Okay, so these first two poems are kind of dedicated to my girlfriend who's making sushi at a fancy party right now. But I still, want to dedicate it to her. So my first poem is called Accessory to Hysterectomy. We stare into the black hole of a 6-week sexual hiatus. The chaste reality, not as daunting as the prohibition. Your doctor might not be talking about our version of sex anyway. Soon you will be wombless. You await the removal of an organ bloated by time into a bad moon. Oh, the anemic drain of shoddy anatomy. The list of preparations forms a new atmosphere around us. We stow away practical items, Xanax, stool softener, a borrowed cane, like they are amulets that guarantee a good outcome. The best outcome is newly empty space. Your vagina will become a tunnel to nowhere that will be sutured. I shrink myself, drift through this passageway before the surgeon closes it. I am an astronaut gliding out of the spaceship's exit into the hidden caverns of your body. This is Scar Reveal. 7 days post-op, we unveil your scar. The veil, a surgical bandage, also known as foam adhesive dressing, a term stitched together from multiple vocabularies: construction, scientific, and sartorial. The filmy bandage opaque, a window to the mending underneath. It clings to your lower abdomen, a taut section that ought not to be messed with. The tenderest skin to tattoo, recently rent by scalpel. A slow, tentative feeling exposes your fresh marking. Dark and red, a smile clashing against your happy trail. Your suggestively hairy abdomen, its slight convexity above the scar, looms beautifully before me as I gingerly smooth on a clean dressing. I kneel before you, imitating a proposal to your scar, once again sealed off and sanitary. The mouth-shaped scar transforms your vulva into a chin. If it could speak, what would it say? Or would it just sustain a strained grin, a symbol of the way you must feel when the Percocet starts to wear off? So this poem I have never read at any open mic, any reading. I've never read. It might require some movement, so that's why I'm not doing this. So this poem is about takes place in a small town named Florala, Alabama. Has anyone been there? It gets confused with Florabama because it's on the border of Florida and Alabama. But this poem is called Florala, Alabama. Gleaming gumbo pots and laundry baskets full of speckled pears recently wrestled from a tree. A medicinal museum of jarred herbs rim the living room walls, homegrown protection. Here, an estate that is often the butt of jokes, those of tweaking alligators riding lawnmowers, a state that would like to make me into an abomination. In a strip mall, I pranced down the aisles of a Piggly Wiggly to Madonna, queerly selecting a baby blue bottle of cotton candy colored Faygo. Tastes like cotton candy. I don't have a lot of farming experience or a lot of girlfriend experience. Blessed with the mindset of a perpetual beginner. Experience more what I stand to gain. I learn from the mammoth sage bundles hanging from wooden beams. I learn from the floppy cone-like ears of Nubian goats. I learn that in the absence of showering, we can communally bathe. Me sitting and you crouching with your lips hovering over the water. All right, let's switch gears before doing some more gear switching. There's gonna be a lot of gear switching. Okay, so this next poem, also never have written it out loud, read it out loud before. This is a poem I very recently written in Carolyn Hembree's Writers at Work class. Some of the people in the audience are members of this class. I wrote part of it and part of it is an imitation of Richard Sykin, who we were fortunate enough to speak to over Zoom. And then part of it I wrote in a really cool liminal workshop with Olivia Wens, who I met at AWP last year, who's really awesome. And so I had some stuff that I wrote in her workshop, and then I was trying to use that material to imitate Richard Sykin. So this is what came out. I'm working with, so it's a poem about the body, and writing a poem about bodies can be inherently feel navel-gazing, but I also think it's important. So I'm kind of taking that concept and I have a two-parter possibility for the title. So the title is either self-portrait with alopecia, or instead of navel gazing, scalp gazing, which is a patented term that I've made up. And it's after Richard Seichen's self-portrait against red wallpaper, which is an awesome poem. Follow the stray strands shed from room to room. I am a dog without their silky coat's tendency to replenish itself. Shave it off or don a wig, but for the most part you just disguise it. Just one more thing to trouble womanhood. People love to mock the balding, avoiding the obvious inevitability of loss. Shame comes from vanity. The embarrassment of bad genes passed down. Suspicion stalks interactions. Who has noticed and who hasn't? Vanity, vanity, forcing its will on the world. Maybe my head hat is just medium thin, like my body is medium thick. Maybe it's just a blemish, like cellulite. Maybe this is nothing and I'm just delusional. Be lucky that it is curly, that it puffs up like an aroused cat, signaling, look how big I am. Look at this web of frizz standing sentry around a valley of fallow scalp, saying, nothing to see here, don't look down. What other choice do I have? My image was formed by the beauty myth, hair as glory. It's a framework problem. I'm trying hard to believe it's not that bad. To imagine myself the heroine of a romance novel, with fine strands hanging just shy of my shoulders. It's probably obvious to taller people who stand eye level to my scalp. It's probable that I'm making a crack into a cavern. I shine the light of my forward-facing camera on the top of my head and I take a picture. I hold my breath before I look. Dark hair, white scalp, mine a larger pale terrain. I'd rather be hirsute. I know, getting rid of unwanted hair is arduous. I hate my friends, those that whine about the inconvenience of thick hair. There is no point of living in a dream world where it all grows back. Okay, time for another gear switch. So that was bodies, part one. And now I am going to, just flipping pages around here. Okay, put this in front, then this in front of this. I'm gonna get my phone because I'm gonna screen a video poem that I made in 2020. I made it with, I collaborated with my partner at the time because they weren't having the poetry festival and they were asking for videos to send in. So I said, and no one was doing much of anything. It was like the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we made this video to a poem that I wrote, How to Clean Urine Out of a Mattress. It was published in Anti-Gravity a while ago when they first started publishing poetry again. And I love this poem, and it's a rather old one, so I'm gonna read it while the video plays, because I think the audio isn't working too good. I wanna get my phone. And then I'll say, ready, set, go, when I'm ready. Ready, set, go. How to clean urine out of a mattress. Subtract that last carafe of wine from the mounting pile of blunders. Eat. Oh wait, it's working. One jagged. Should I go with my words? Okay. If I had a vine's instinct to snake through those invisible windows of negative space created by fences or whatever infrastructure exists in said vine's proximity, then I wouldn't be here contemplating my body's waste. I'd be at the beach with my friends, letting the sun dote on me until it burns my flesh. But there is meditation hidden in every rote task, grounding in the extrasensory experience of pulling a spray bottle's plastic trigger, methodically expelling its acidic content over the pungent Rorschach blot of your disappointment, skirting its perimeter with quick bursts, until the deep amber stain is coaxed a stormy gray, congruent with your mindscape's ambient synaptic buzz. Plans to curtail excess, deja vu of desperations past, a color catalog of letdowns flipbooks through your intellects and projects onto that warm, thick, your unconscious urethra leaked onto the mattress like an anatomical saboteur. I'm going to miss a few lines there to sync it up, but it's also on my Instagram, link in bio, that's the link, it's on video, so check it out. Next, we are moving, I guess that was kind of body, so now we're moving into places. And I am reading a poem that I wrote about a memorial marker in New Orleans. I wrote this like last spring in a workshop class, so it's called More Cenotaph Than Headstone. After years of parking on the same block of North Derby Street, I saw the styrofoam figure 8, a chunk gobbled off the top loop like it was a donut. In the shadow of a white house, it echoed the washed out facade, color's absence. What took me so long? Perhaps it was the street's competing attractions, the new community garden sprouting from milk crates, or the freshly renovated instrument repair shop. That's the subordinate nature of the side street, one you only pass through on your way out of work, mind advancing to its next slide. White vinyl covered the figure 8, cracking off in places where weather had had its way. We say water degrades things, but the way it actually happens is less malevolent, more like exhausting them. The stature of a headstone without the heft of rock. 8, stationed in the grass near a stop sign, outside of any property line. It stood in the part of the grass where you feel absolved from flicking a cigarette or letting a dog shit because it belongs to the city. Stenciled on the 8 in an expired gray, long live Nike P. A swishing symbol underlined the name. Stats specified the lifespan of the departed for every passerby. Checked in January 12th, 1995. Checked out March 23rd, 2020. Long lived, a subjective interpretation of time, like turning the figure 8 on its side to signify infinity. It tried, transformed into a thing I could not unclock. Okay, we got some more places. So before I read my next poem, I'm going to read someone else's poem because I think the two are in conversation with each other. And for my next poem, I was like, I wish I had like an epigram or kind of something, but I wasn't finding the right thing. And then I was looking at poetry this morning on Instagram of all things, and I found this wonderful poem that I'm so glad to have found by someone named Tariq Lazoon, and I think that it kind of speaks well. They speak well with each other. So Tariq, I just am finding out about him, so I'll just tell you a little bit about him. He's from Michigan. He's a community organizer, poet, among other things, and the son of immigrants from Gaza, Palestine. And this poem was originally published in LitHub, I think in 2018. So I'm going to read Tariq Lazoon's poem, We Already Know This. There is more to us than what was taken from us. A place to call home, land of olive trees and their branches. Palestine, there, I've said it. I want to be sure that everyone knows where my parents hail. Everyone needs a place to call home. Genocide. Everyone, I would hope, knows that it did not start and did not end with the Holocaust. I haven't forgotten that. Everyone needs a place on this planet. And I prefer to live where I can leave the doors unlocked, or live without the doors, or hell, I don't even care for walls. But I do care for the blues. Water, the sadness that comes when it is not within sight. I don't know if there's a child anywhere on this earth that wasn't at least once held by their mother. Again, water. Where my mother held me until I was given to land. Oh, firm land, how my father holds me. Folks keep calling for blood to dress you in it. I don't think any of them know, truly, how much of it the body can take, how much of it the body can lose. So that was We Already Know This by Tariq Lathune. This is my poem. It's only like a few weeks old, and basically it's about how we're taught about oppression in a vacuum, kind of only taught about maybe oppression that the people that are teaching us feel pertains to our danger and not to the other people being oppressed at the same time, and how that's kind of a disservice to us all. So this poem is called Being Told People Hate You, Then Seeing Your People Kill. A Hebrew school teacher rolls out a clunky television. We watch gray skeletons heaped in cavernous holes. You think of it while babysitting later. Tuck your chai necklace behind a t-shirt. Trekking the vast desert in a group of 30 strangers, awestruck by the land, you never felt it was yours. Shema Yisrael, a part of every prayer you've uttered by memory. Maybe it should just stay there in the prayer. Now a prime minister blames violence on human animals. All the death knocks shards of grief loose inside you, coats each inhalation and exhalation. Unrelenting missiles pulverize Gazan buildings to premature ruins. Gray bomb clouds haunt the skies. Drying blood cakes around warped limbs. What if this Holocaust were imprinted on us as young as our own? The boy who built a cart of Lego blocks to tote you around morphs into an adversary. Someone who believes in the right to a Jewish motherland. You two Americans, raised to succeed, not be sensitive. The phone grows filmy with tears and fingerprints. You have an addiction to the truth that can't be satisfied. Because you will not pledge loyalty to the bomb droppers, Mother says, I feel like I've failed you. The bullseye of hatred on all our backs looks the same from the sight of a rifle. Thank you. I have just a few more. This next poem is an older one, probably from a few years ago, and it was published in the New Delta Review, and they nominated it for a Best of the Net, so I thought I would read it, and it's called Keeping Up with the Neighbors. The next door neighbor is a tow truck zealot. When my guest's sloppy parking job nudged onto his driveway, he scrawled on a piece of paper and used her wiper to pin it across the windshield. People from Rhode Island are stupid or assholes, you choose. The couple on the other side of my duplex strike me as more radical than thou. They keep bees in their backyard and sow our shared front lawn with wildflowers, but they take no interest in me or mine, besides a cordial hi or a curt knock on the front door when my dog crawls into their compost bin. The neighbor perpendicular to me grills religiously in front of his house. This lures my dog to lick at the grease spots that have seeped into his sidewalk. We exchanged pleasantries, and he once blessed me with a bag of apples, all without the two of us ever exchanging names. My neighbor around the corner has rock star syndrome. It's just him and his guitar and an amplified classic rock backing track for an audience of whoever walks by on the way back from buying beer at the gas station. The short couple who lives across the street in a brick ranch house with a low sloping roof gleefully court my dog's affection. I stopped to let them revel in canine roleplay until they let it slip that they weren't in favor of removing Confederate monuments. Then I cut them out of my heart and my dog walking radius. The neighbor living with his family at the head of the street reminds me of Gilbert Gottfried without the signature graveling voice. He has mammoth sunflowers growing into his expansive yard and a fig tree that spills into the street like a signpost for a free-for-all eatery. But it is the reclusive neighbor that lives alone near the back end of the block, in a white house with a shapely trimmed hedge and ivy-colored facade, who captivates my curiosity. After 4 years of walking past his fence twice a day and nodding my head in greeting, I recently met his gardening gaze and I told him how I felt. Yours is the most beautiful house on the block. And I'm gonna end with 2 poems from Dear Egg, my chapbook, out from Tilted House, March of 2023. What can I say? Everyone who has anything to do with Tilted House is really smart and cool, so I'm just like so lucky to have this chapbook. So I really encourage you, if you like these poems, feel free to buy one. And either way, whether you're buying my chapbook or another in their catalog, please support Tilted House because they're creating such professional, amazing work and opportunities for people like me and writers like you. So please support. So we're gonna keep with bodies and places, and I'll read a body and a place. Okay. So this is July 29th. Dear Egg. The urge to test the limits of how awake one can be. My body is a guinea pig for genuine chemical reactions. My body is a damn obligation, a soft wrapper for the mind's pandemonium. I remember walking around the grounds of my middle school in 8th grade and feeling like my butt wasn't so big that it was an entity I had to haul. This is a reminder that I've always been wise, yet disillusioned. If making something heavier and more convoluted was a federal crime, then I'd be one of those seasoned lifers stamping aluminum into license plates. And this is a place one about our fair city. July 16th. Dear Egg, according to NOLA.com, someone was injured yesterday when their car drove off the 14th floor of a parking garage downtown. The garage itself recently exploded skyward from a flat level parking lot in order to support a brand new commercial imaginary. The article read as if the car took its own plunge, right in front of a new trendy brunch place, landing like a dead bug on its back. I bet that it was the loudest sound heard all day, besides the proverbial cha-ching of money changing hands. That's all. We've reached our end.
Applause going. Keep it going. It's my pleasure to introduce Laura Mullen. A MacDowell Foundation Fellow, a featured poet at the International Poetry Festival in Taipei, a Rona Jaffe Award recipient, and a National Endowment for the Arts Fellow. Laura Mullen holds degrees from the University of Iowa and UC Berkeley. Her poetry has been anthologized in collections from Norton, Wesleyan, and elsewhere. Recent work has appeared in the Harvard Review, Court Green, Diagram, and elsewhere. Her collaboration with composer Nathan Davis, A Sound Uttered, A Silence Crossed, had its premiere in La Jolla and has been performed at Notre Dame and Williams College. A collaboration Verge with John David O'Brien was published in 2017, and her translations of Veronique Pittolo's Hero was published by Black Square Editions in 2019. Solid Objects published her 9th collection, Etc., ETC, Elsie the Cow, from which she'll perform tonight. These poems you'll experience this evening unravel and reshape the ideologies of language and poetics. They deconstruct modernisms and even postmodernisms to expose their fluidity and limitations. The poems attack the false stability of language deployed intentionally by corporate entities. However, it is not just a fighting back. These poems fight through and end up so far past their opponents that they create a new landscape for poetry and poetics. Rachel Blau Duplessis might call this intricate, bottomless tangibility, a lively sense of the social sensuousness of language and of thinking as praxis inside a poem as practice. This is the genius of Mullen's poetry and has been for some time. The book itself, as it exists in our consumer culture, concretely pushes against the material legalities of what we, poets, are allowed to write in a late capitalist society. Imagine the linguistics of capitalism as an oligarch's high-rise. These poems, and notably their syntax, are mind dynamite attached to the support structures of that high-rise. This is a controlled demolition. Strap a hard hat on your fireproof mind. These poems are satisfyingly dangerous. Please welcome to the Splice stage, Laura Mullen.
Oh my God, Henry, that was so fantastic. Sean, that was so fantastic. Sorry, I'm having a slippage. It's been a long month since I wrote what's going to be my most famous poem, which was Ex Post.
Oh.
Yeah. Which I'm now reading. But I will leap into this book, which only came out on November 2nd, and which would never have been written if I hadn't lived in New Orleans, where y'all taught me how to be brave. And which, in fact, has not had a real welcome reading in a way until now. I shouldn't say that because I got to read it from it today at Words and Music. However, this is the first time that I've been able to read a stretch of poems with just one other amazing poem. That was a joy just reading. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask you not to do the beautiful New Orleans thing you do and applaud between poems, because I'm exactly the asshole who will sit there going, oh, that one didn't get as much. So let's not. And what I'm going to do is actually just read kind of into it. I spent a lot of time not only on the poems, but on the order. And so I'm just going to read starting at the starting and we'll see where I get. Yeah. All right. So it's in memory of Martha Reed, the book. The epigraph is from Sarah Ahmed. I now want to discuss whiteness as a bad habit. Sioux City Milk War, 1932. Sing muses, if you will, of what opened once in the spread between what farmers earned for milk and the price consumers paid at the lip of the Depression. Speak of roads shut by mazes of hay bales, hot farmers with shotguns asking drivers their business, and the ditches running white with the poured out milk on this holiday, which was the word used in place of strike. Tell us again of that long ago August and those for whom justice became urgent. Sing of the right to collective bargaining, if you love us, or let the silence eloquent around that lost history speak here of fearfulness. Chant the history of hikes and dips in land prices, the diminishing numbers of farms, and remember now the great corporations, wielders of the cease and desist letters, whose names, removed here, we must not take in vain. May the talking flower or satellite dish, from which our avatar partially emerges, echo the words of Mr. Archie Wright, who saw the small farm as the basis of our democracy and said, to live, you have to think. Disclaimer. Elsie isn't my invention. Her father worked in advertising or urology, but everything, absolutely everything in these poems is purely imaginary, and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is completely accidental. Even her laughter is a copy of a my father collected art, she breaks in. I'm rich, he examined me down there. Yes, designed a better light. She lifts her legs high. He sees me, she adds, speaking confidentially. But nothing in this book should be confused with the actual, and that's my opening, a door ajar. Is barn or barb? To hear and here is hop, is an open and shut case for care. What comes when love is gone? Long says lock the gate, too late, wait, just shut it, then shut it again, hard. In this empty stable, shit is the only sign we were ever born or bored. What I heard was, that's not what I heard. Mistress of the West. Stubborn residue of the Egyptian goddess Hathor and the golden calf, well mixed with a host of other comedies. Elsie the Sea, 1936, is the bright face and beloved mascot for an unnamed dairy company. She burst forth from the gathering clouds as a way of keeping an embodied origin, and with it a myth of purity in place at the start of the heavy-duty industrialization of America's food supply. She is still used to sell us things we like to eat. What else do you need? She was married early, and the image of her husband's horned head adorns the plastic bottles of an oft-used adhesive once produced by the chemical division of that same unnamed company. Blessed be his name and the names of their offspring. Elsie has many degrees, including Doctor of Bovinity, Human Kindness, and Economics, and she's Queen of Dairyland, as well as, so we're told, an honorary chief of the Seneca people, who are not in fact the first suffragettes. As Elsie tries to insist, there's a silence regarding her similarity to another laughing logo previous. In 1952, she was more easily recognized than many celebrities, including a presidential candidate. Her father arced in the land of the dead, in those realms reserved for advertising. Elsie the Eidolon died long ago, was not Elsie at all, but good enough Lobelia, her live representative, because she was flirtatious, became Elsie, swinging her hips, fluttering long eyelashes, died in an accident, her truck rear-ended. She's buried, so there is no real Elsie unless you want to count the little girl who said she was car sick, whose parents didn't care or else didn't want to stop. There are always more cows who can be Elsie, at least for as long as we need to pretend she still exists. A little girl grows up marries, chairs a department of anguish, 3 years in the diary industry, never forgets she as the dizzy, disinterested countryside continued to spin past, ended up puking into her own gloved hands. I'm not fresh. I'm a guarantee of freshness. There's a difference, Elsie explains to us. In the emergency meeting she calls to watch us discuss what she refers to as our problems, reduction in market share and the need for strategic initiatives to be instituted ASAP, and stop all this copying now, sooner than now, yesterday if possible, she snaps. Bossy cow, someone in the back lisps, bit. In the deserted diary building, those being milked by the newly invented machines slide past on the rotary parlor, which begins to turn more quickly until out of the blur the numbered years come flying toward us on bits of torn paper, just like in a movie. And then there's a voiceover insisting that the supply chain is free of animal cruelty. The animals appearing in this documentary, a male voice states calmly, are not cruel at all. Trust me. The one thing we know about Elsie, she doesn't own herself, she can't. Structured out of the category of the individual twice, animal, female, though she speaks for or represents the brand, she can't brand, which is to say market herself. The rights to her image always lie elsewhere. And her role is limited to this, to stand in for an obscured origin in order to sell something more to someone else. Elsie works, in other words, for free, in support of the free market, in the land of the free and the very, very frightened, in that homeland which comes into being where threatened, whose happy functioning, or so we are told, depends on her ability and willingness to shop. I'm not asking you to identify with her. I'm asking you to stop. The imaginary begins in the real, or the consensually recognized, but flees for reasons we may or may not expect to be exiled, nomad, cosmopolitan, refugee, not expat, exactly, not that timid and judgmental. Estranged, yes, but desperately. The imaginary emerges as sacred, homeless, caught at the edge of the country previously called home, in a country which might bear the name of home a while. I see you, the imagination says. I see you seeing me, stepping out into the lap of fatherland. I see you tenderly, remorselessly. Queen of Muses. This has an epigraph from the wonderful poet Terry Woodtick. Says the eye chart. Elsie the Sea is an opening, an opportunity. Both her names end with E. So if you even say hello, you're squealing. And everything, my lawyers insist, I insist, is completely imaginary. Even the ocean, even the refugees, squeeze, escaping bowel, the only thing escaping. Stop writing about me like this, Elsie says primly. You need to be sympathetic. Poems are for deepening our emotional capabilities. Yours are not impressive at by, seeming to be slightly less capacious than your bra size. Poetry is meant to lead you to love, she huffs, as if it were a drug like morphine, which memorably once allowed me to feel the whole world was my friend. Briefly. Let me think about that and get back to you. Elsie thinks that if I were writing correctly, I'd be married by now, or at least have better selfies. And I think a literature meant to help its author be interpolated into the larger marketing strategy is bound to be a very limited field of activity. Right? But Elsie, who hates to be lectured to, as she puts it, is already turning away. Let me think, she says, about that and get back to you. She won't. She fixes her lipstick, adjusts her statement necklace of yellow daisies. I think it's a choker, actually. And fluffs her horn. Please, I hear her humming as she prances off. And she repeats it. Me, she adds, like I. Whatever parts us, this unites. The feeling that the faces of 4 young men from a corner of a former empire are more like our mother's face than our mother's face. In their ebullient joy, apparently lighthearted confidence, buoyed by the pleasure of seemingly endless success, in their marvelous energy and delicious wit, in their willingness to keep trying out new ideas, forms, and instruments, in their willingness to try and be seen trying, in their evolution, in the stream of hits which was like being held and not put down or only released long enough to feel each new embrace as fresh, doesn't the ongoing shared adoration make of those who love them family? As if love was this, a long stint at the top of the charts, weeks turning into years, each good lyric dislodged from its place by the better one, each new definition of good surpassed by the next. They lean over our lives as if the covers of the early record albums, Please Please Me or Rubber Soul, provided a collective first memory, distant and then less distant, a little distorted. They presided our birth, looking down and wanting, so we're told, to love and please us, to hold our hand. My hand, which is your hand. The clasp, which is the reiterated desire for the clasp. Decades like that. All of us with our arms outstretched and our cheeks wet, as if they were our mothers, and our mothers only their bitter, fat, forgotten opening acts. When one of them slowly began to acknowledge his love for a lost mother, it broke the group up, but by then we're on our way to the recording of him screaming, a noise, we might argue, he pays for with his life. Will we be educated about their citations and barely acknowledged influences reappropriations? Not really. We will love them forever for allowing us to pretend that they were the source and we were the source of the source somehow. And we will mirror each other like that from cradle to coffin, yeah, as if they were our mourners. And we could look up into the faces of those who, loved us. We can never touch. The texture of fences. We lean against, longing to be let in, that is, out of wherever it is we were before. Love me, not as who I am, I can't bear it, but who I'm going to be. I'm not that anymore, it's all different, until all of what was is this improvised encampment and other transients with whom we do battle for water, foil, blankets, soap, the use of a cell phone, pieces of plastic sheeting, moments of precarious hope, a steady grief, denied, as if to feel less would make us more like those secure in their lives on the other side, more likely to be let through, accepted as full citizens, bowing, eyes shut, forehead against taut wire, the cramp in our fingers wrapped tightly in the meshes of what we wish would stop existing or just be meaningless long enough to let us pass. Playing the Cow Palace. When my friend who lives on Elsie Street recalled of the Beatles concert she went to in San Francisco, or rather Daly City, is the sound which completely drowned out the singing of girls screaming, and then the smell after the music was over and the crowds were filing away of urine. because so many young women wet themselves in a media-driven ecstasy of safe because hopeless desire for the cute boys in matching suits and haircuts, bringing back to the former colony a rollicking version of rhythm and blues. A music invented in America by the descendants of the enslaved, struggling to survive the murderous injustices the country was just beginning to face. On meaning. Somewhere in there, 1966 or 67, I discovered the repetition could lead to estrangement. I said the word milk to myself at night. Why? Over and over, and heard it askew, oddly, heard it as if it were music, nonsense, or a mysterious word in a foreign language. What a weird syllable. Milk, 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 I murmured, trying to make the word come back to sense, but watching it like an escaped pet run further away, deeper into pure sound the more I called it, as I kept calling it. Why had I ever thought it knew its own name, or thought it had a name, or thought I could name it? White streak up the empty field at dusk and across the street, over the train tracks into a dark, pathless tangle of pine and scrub oak. Milk. Milk, 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 milk. The milk extended the K, coming down with a fierce chop, and some other life starting there, where I was lying in bed and noticed, I'm always noticing things, the swell of my hip for the first time, raising the sheet, and thought at once, that is sexual. I am female, and that is dangerous. The noise all around me of sex beginning to be a code I would learn to use somewhat haltingly. My school, movies and television, my tutor, pedophile. Sex, sex, sex. And so my new life began, in which I was a confused and slow refugee in a mostly hostile country, America, a land where you were expected to pay one way or another for intimacy. Alien there, I still knew my name. I could tell you my father was milk, my mother was don't, and I was born on a dairy farm with my brother Ben, and where we all told each other everything sooner or later, as truth was our only harvest, and our rich autumn was called D equals I equals V equals O equals R equals C equals E. And almost everything, from that time of my ripening, where my body became another border to be crossed, was set to the catchy tunes of the cute white boys who grew up in the slave port. Oh, I'll tell you something I think you'll understand. Odds and ends. In a station of the etc., I went to Collapse to study diary framing, and all I got was this beef shirt. Cowism, etc. Because if somebody's chasing you around the pasture with a knife, if someone's loading you into a trailer with other cows with a knife, if someone's driving you all to the abattoir where someone will stick a knife into your guts and twist as you're slipping down on the concrete floor, slick with offal excrement, blood, piss, if you're waiting to be the next one slaughtered, screaming and pissing yourself in fright, if someone's cutting off your head with a sharp knife on the way to mapping the flayed corpse for further cuts, you don't turn around and say, chillax. I was a poster child for the diary industry, labeled promising sometimes too, or best. And I was a cute blonde girl who grew up in an art gallery. You don't. You just don't. Vertigo, etc. You fall in love with a cow, pretending to be a woman, and end up with a woman, pretending to be a cow. It doesn't matter, it's all dead meat by the end of the movie anyway, and you can look down without feeling weak, dizzy, and small. And I'll read just two more if there's time, yeah? Okay, two more. Confessional poem. Those who suspected my very fine paycheck with the addition of healthcare and other benefits were more the result of an accident of timing rather than merit were, of course, correct. I got in on the pyramid scheme of the diary industry early, if not at its very best juncture. I got in before the border company realized that 75% of the workforce could be employed without the promise of quote or hope of tenure. Before the stables were full of restless little doggies, anxious, indebted, ambitious, and grateful to be allowed to do my job twice over, and, as each one ardently believed, to do it better, for about a third of what I was paid. Meanwhile, we all went on working to make these things poems we were told were really, really valuable and important, but which were, of course, we understood this, not likely to be anything anyone would be paid for. Meaning they were worth a lot more than money, though money kept turning out to be the only thing that mattered. Only it also seemed it didn't matter at all, or only sort of mattered, and so we kept hoping to understand what it was, this thing called mattering, and why life didn't. And so I was wondering, as I finished writing this, whether or not I'd be able to give the book away, while trying not to let that question matter too much or too visibly. Sometimes that's what it seems like education is, training in what to let matter and how much and when, and how not to show anyone if something matters in case it shouldn't matter, and yet to keep alive in yourself the ability to let things matter just in case. Cowhide briefcase. The epigraph is Keats. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? Walk in across the field, then out, but as a cow. Use every part. Why the long face? Oh, cut it out, short, make it count. A box of hide amplified is what my life I have to speak of, wasted, which might seem to more than my fair market share like undeserved luck. Fuck. Speak up. But as the cow, you always thought you what? Lodging another dispatch from that milk-white womanhood invented and unevenly enacted here as privileges, proof, going all like, can I move you? Be part of an authentic, emotional experience. It's just envy is how the head of human resources needs me to see spin into guilt. And so get on with it, not ashes in my mouth, not thistles, trashed planet. And stop this short-sighted greed, heartless suits, mess of contracts. Stop. It's up to you to be happy. Accessible flayed carcass on the incandescent glass of the trademark, successful trademark. Be all that. Starting from today, a day like a knife at a throat said, they're just gelling. Hope, to be allowed to train, to qualify, to attempt, to try to be the spokescow of, then lawyer up. Count the wadded paychecks, asses, whistles, dripping, glitched out of these fat, damp chops. Not enough. Can I be heard as something other than a romance of advertisements slathered over injustice, this mess of success projected onto someone else's airbrushed fronts? Be your best you who, repeated plea, bargain to be imagined as relevant in the imaginary afterlife, past the long expired sell by, use by date. Not me. I'm going to read the last, or second to last, because there's a hidden track, poem in the book, and I'm just reading it because she put it up on the interwebs, as Alice Notley calls it, and because I adore her, this poem is her Carolyn Hembry. Yeah. Good night, Moo. Leadbelly sang my father to sleep at a Communist party in a Los Angeles that barely existed then and doesn't exist at all anymore, unless what you call existence is this stripped down, bleached out cow skull decked with red shreds of dry gore, gilded in places and crawling with lost bees, confused bees, bees no longer able to tell the difference between bones and flowers, bees for whom death has a sweetness.
Keep it going for Laura Mullen. And keep it going for Dan Unger. Closing remarks. I've been wondering at a phrase lately, the phrase humoring yourself, which is to say, denotatively, comply to your own wishes, no matter how unreasonable they might be. And then I thought to myself, I'm unreasonable. I have wishes. Maybe this humor thing is for me. But then I found out that the word humor comes from the Latin for moisture. And naturally I think of this summer's drought, which until very recently has spurred swamp fires and burn bans and noxious fumes which entertain each of our lungs. And in that moment, I was no longer into, as Steve Martin has called it, the whole comedy thing. Well, yeah, certainly we humor that, albeit unwittingly, our shared environments, simply making the best of it, humoring a hurricane, or humoring a power outage, or humoring the price of rent and gas and insurance. We're not above it. You too humor Splice. Every month or so, come in, have a drink, humor a couple of poets, hopefully go home and think about the joke. Maybe in the now, maybe later, maybe after buying their books. But indeed, lately, it's a bit harder to laugh, given the drought, given the dry, non-conducive conditions for comedy. But humor me here from a 1986 interview, which for you mathematicians out there is over 10 years ago, with Noam Chomsky, quote, "You cut off every political option for people and they are going to turn to terrorism." There's an interesting reaction here when this is brought up. You're justifying terrorism. We're not justifying terrorism. Justification and explanation are two different things. What you're pointing out is that there's an explanation for terrorism, and if you want to stop it, you look at the explanation. When you look at the explanation, you quite often find that violent, powerful states try to evoke terrorism because it's in their interest. That's no justification, that's an explanation. Of course, it turns out there's another meaning of humor, or rather humorism, which grew out of moisture, humor being that of four bodily fluids, proposed by the Greek doctor Hippocrates, of no relation to the word hypocrite, despite seeing and sounding the same. One of which those humors was blood. The nutritional value of the blood was the source of energy for the body and the soul. Now, a lot has changed in medicine since 400 BC, but you might be surprised to find out that one of the foundational beliefs has remained constant. That when blood from the body is outside of the body, the function of the body is lost entirely. And this next line, in its humor, is about as tacky as blood. Is peace not a wish of yours? Is it so unreasonable a wish? And to close out, I ask you to humor me, and humor your neighbor, and humor yourself. And I thank you for coming.